Peace, everybody. Marc Lamont Hill here. We are talking about the ceasefire that was just announced earlier today, or just a few hours ago, and really in Israel, early Wednesday morning, we'll say early Wednesday, November the 22nd. Uh, Israel and Hamas reach an agreement for a 4-day ceasefire. So let's just get right to it. First of all, there's no such thing as a 4-day ceasefire. A 4-day ceasefire does not make sense. The debate for the entire time that there has been uh, violence since October 7th has been, is there a ceasefire that could be possible? The Israeli government, along with the United States, has said from the gate, we are not even considering a ceasefire. What we will consider is a humanitarian pause. The pause could be a few hours, the pause could be a few days. What they've effectively done is enact the very thing that they said they wouldn't do, right? This is not a ceasefire. Ceasefire is when the violence is stopped, when there's a peace agreement made, when there is a truce. This is not a truce. This is not a peace agreement. This is a temporary, conditional humanitarian pause. They're not saying that, but I'm telling you, that's what it is. The agreement is that over the next 4 days, there will be no violence as long as 50 hostages, Israeli hostages, are released. The hostages will be released every single day over 4 days. So 12 to 13 hostages will be released over a 4-day period. For every day that 12 to 13 hostages get released, Israel agrees to not bomb Gaza, to not have ground troops in Gaza, to not strike Gaza. So this is a day to day humanitarian pause that's only guaranteed for 4 days. So that's the first thing we want to talk about. The second thing that's important to talk about is that the mainstream media, as soon as they announced this humanitarian pause or this uh, ceasefire, in quotes, they said that a ceasefire was being made in exchange for 50 Israeli hostages to be released. That is true. But the thing that the media didn't say, the thing that the media didn't talk about is the fact that 150 Palestinian prisoners would be released. Why is that important? Well, because the media makes it sound as if, and the Israeli government makes it sound as if they're just bossing up and finally playing tough and talking tough and fighting tough with Hamas, and now suddenly they are getting their hostages back. It sends the message that the reason they're getting their hostages back is because they are striking Gaza and bombing Gaza and engaging in a relentless besiegement of Gaza, and that's why suddenly the hostages are getting released, and that Hamas had no choice but to cave. But that's not actually what's happening. Hamas is exchanging the hostages, the 50 hostages, for 150 Palestinian prisoners. That's the swap. And that's a swap that could have happened last week. That's a swap that could have happened a month ago. It's not as if Hamas was unwilling to make that deal. It's not as if Israel was unwilling to make a deal to get their hostages back. They just weren't willing to give up any Palestinian prisoners. So this is not what the media represented it to be. When the Israeli government issued its statement, they said, we're stopping violence to get our hostages back. That looks good at home. That makes the Israeli public look like Netanyahu played tough and that he won. When in fact, Israel is losing the public sentiment. Israel is losing uh, the what do you call it? Israel is losing the public relations war. On October 7th, the world was behind Israel. They said what Hamas did was awful. This is inexcusable. It's indefensible. There's nothing we can do but stand with Israel. And day after day of relentless bombing of Gaza, relentless bombing of hospitals and mosques and churches and schools has shifted the public tide. And so Israel had to do something different. And most of the Israeli government understood that. There are, however, some people who did not. There are 38 members of the cabinet that voted for this truce. 3 did not. You will be stunned to know, if you know Israeli politics, you understand why I'm being sarcastic here. You will be stunned to know that one of the 3 people was Itamar Ben Gavir. Itamar Ben Gvir. He is the national security minister of Israel, and he is so far right wing and racist and indefensibly hawkish. It's like if you took Dick Cheney and John Bolton and wrapped them up with some Donald Trump. You know, like that's the kind of vibes Itamar Ben Gvir gives off. Itamar Ben Gvir has literally been convicted of terrorism before. He is a convicted terrorist, like literally. So it's in that context. Um, it's in that context that you understand that there are people in the Israeli cabinet right now who are still saying, you know what, let's just keep bombing Gaza. We're almost there. Sadly, and I say that with no, obviously no pleasure, and not even tongue in cheek. It's how they were acting. We'll keep talking about this, y'all. Hit the join button, hit the subscribe button right now. If you're enjoying this conversation, hit the like button. We're going to continue to build and continue to talk. I'm going to take some questions from y'all as well, because I know a lot of y'all have questions about what's going on. Jess said, are they letting humanitarian aid in over these 4 days? The civilians are suffering without without aid. It's a great question. The answer is yes. Israel is going to stop all military actions in Gaza. That's no bombing, no ground troops, nothing. And that there are at least several hundred trucks that are carrying humanitarian aid. That's food, that's medicine, that's fuel. And according to the Israeli government, I got to say, this is what they said, all of that stuff will be permitted into the Gaza Strip, and they will be able to access it. So this is, again, not a ceasefire, but a humanitarian pause. A temporary ceasefire is fascinating language. Somebody says, is it Joeed? Yeah, Joeed says, what can the international public do in this time to call for a greater ceasefire? Well, there's a couple of things that have to happen for this ceasefire to extend. And let me be clear, a ceasefire is what we need. I don't want humanitarian pauses, but if we have to call it a humanitarian pause, but it can last forever, forever, I can live with that. So how do we do that? First of all, there has to actually be no violence on the ground. Hamas has to respond to this ceasefire with no violence. Israel has to respond to this ceasefire with no violence. If both sides actually don't engage in any significant hostilities, that's the first step, because all bets are off if that happens. If that happens and there is success, I think you will then maybe see President Biden uh, grow some courage. You'll see Macron. You'll see the entire kind of West start to stand up and say, "Hey, this is working. Let's continue this." They can act tough and say it's a carrot and stick approach to Hamas, whatever they got to say. But at the end of the day, the international community can play its part by calling for another day and calling for another week, calling for a greater period of peace and stability. The international community is not just Western governments, though. The international community is also made up of human rights organizations, right? Human rights organizations have to continue to push to get into Gaza. As of now, and I spoke to the head of Amnesty International yesterday. I spoke to Agnes Calamar yesterday. One of the big challenges is organizations can't get in to document what's happening in Gaza. The Israeli government is blocking access, they're severely restricting access. Media can't get in without severe restrictions. They have to show what's on their footage to Israel. Israel only takes them to certain sites. They're not allowed to talk to folk in kind of on the ground. And so the international community has to continue to press to get inside of the state of Israel. That's another piece of this. The nations in the global south, those who have held down the Palestinian people, and I mean held down in the Black sense of it, I mean, like, held them down, been supportive. Those who have supported the Palestinian government and the Palestinian people have to continue to be vocal in saying that these are war crimes, that these are violations of international law, and they have to also pressure or create pressure so that their engineers can come in, so their scientists can come in to once again combat claims, or at least confirm claims that Hamas is hiding under Al-Shifa hospital, to confirm that there's bomb centers here and terrorist outlets there, there needs to be a very clear and committed international effort to put a spotlight on this, because this is not going to go well if we continue to allow the status quo to prevail. What do you think the end game is, and how do we get to peace, realistically, knowing the politics on both sides? That question comes from Lema Abu Shamala. Thank you for that question. And again, y'all hit the subscribe button, join the conversation, stay in the conversation, hit that like button, and don't be afraid to join the MLH channel right now. We love having you in the conversation. I think ultimately, as I always say, justice is the precondition of peace. There will never be peace in the region until we see a significant shift in the politics on the ground, or what Netanyahu will call the facts on the ground. 150 Palestinians being released is amazing for those 150 Palestinian prisoners, but there are more than 20,000 Palestinian prisoners who are languishing in Israeli jails. Many of them have not committed a significant crime. Many of them have not committed a crime at all. Many haven't even been charged with a crime. They're sitting in administrative detention with no charges. And you can be sitting in administrative detention in Palestine for decades, not decades, but for months, without a charge. I have some friends right now who are literally sitting in jail right now on administrative detention. And they're not seen in, because they're not citizens of Israel. If you're coming from the West Bank, or if you're coming from East Jerusalem, it's a little fuzzier with East Jerusalem, but you're seen in a military court, not a civil court, not a civilian court. So it's a funky thing. So we're going to need more prisoners to be released. Ultimately, we're going to need a resolution to who's going to control Gaza. The Israeli government has been very clear in saying that they are not going to allow Hamas to maintain control. Now, obviously, Hamas was democratically elected in 2006. So that's their argument. The other side of that argument is that they haven't been elected since 2006. It's been 17 years. They don't have a democratic mandate anymore. Half of the people in the Gaza Strip are under the age of 18, which means that they were either not alive or they were toddlers when Hamas was elected. And so the people haven't chosen Hamas. And even when the people did vote for Hamas in 2006, they won with a plurality. I believe it was 44% to 42% with Fatah. So under that context, we need elections. But the Palestinian people have to be the ones to decide. We can't have this colonial logic, like Alan Dershowitz told me last night, that says that the Palestinian people choose the wrong people, and so they can't be able to have elections. That is the most paternalistic settler colonial logic I have ever heard. At the end of the day, the Palestinian people have to be the deciders of the Palestinian fate, not Israel, not the United States, not the UK, not France, not Iran, not Jordan, not Egypt, not Syria, not Lebanon, none of them. That has to be the way this thing goes. So that's going to have to be the outcome here. We're going to need some significant changes on the ground. And ultimately, we're going to have an honest conversation about what the final status of this region is going to be. A two-state solution is off the table. People can say that it's on the table, but that is just a pretext. It's just a political football that gets kicked down the field. And at the end of the day, a two-state solution is no longer viable. There are Israelis who are saying that a two-state solution is not viable. But they're saying that because they don't think that Palestinians can rule themselves. They want a one-state reality where Israel continues to control all of Eretz Israel, like the nation-state law says, where they have everything from the river to the sea. And as much as they hate river to the sea, ostensibly, they're very clearly saying, as the Likud 1977 party statement slogan said, that they're going to control everything from the river to the sea. That's a one-state reality that keeps the Palestinian people in an apartheid state. We can't have that. We need one-state secular democracy, one person, one vote, where everybody gets a vote. Everybody gets a say in democracy. Nobody's ethnic or national or religious status is above another person's. That's the outcome that we need. That's the reality that we want. Heather Ratlade said, indeed, Dershowitz sounded Hitler-esque. It was disgusting, and I appreciate you pushing down their throat. Dershowitz says a lot of fascinating things to me, and I don't mean that in a good way. The Dersh, he has been advocating for a two-state solution since the 70s. But unfortunately, his idea of the two-state solution is a problematic one, and we could talk about that another time. let's keep rocking here. What about settler violence? Settler violence is an important thing. In the West Bank, we're seeing a rise in settler violence. There's always settler violence, but we've seen a rise in settler violence. People in those settlements in the West Bank are walking around with weapons. They are harassing people. I've spoken to people who live in the West Bank who say that people have been stripped down naked, literally stripped down naked. People have been beaten. People are being chased. People are being shot at, and some have been shot allegedly. We're seeing settlers become more and more emboldened as the events post October 7th have taken place. And under the guise of security and fear and protecting themselves, we're seeing Palestinians subjected to some of the worst conditions that we've seen since the last Intifada more than 20 years ago. So we got to keep our eyes open. We got to keep our eyes peeled. We got to make sure that there's a plan in place for the West Bank and not just Gaza. Because in the West Bank right now, you see growing frustration, you see growing dissatisfaction, and you also see a growing distrust among the Palestinian people of the Sulta, of the Palestinian Authority, which does not have the mandate of the people as well. So with all of that together, there ultimately needs to be an emergence of a Palestinian leadership, not a Palestinian Gandhi, not a Palestinian Martin Luther King, but a Palestinian leader, a Palestinian party that is committed to Palestinian self-determination, not to being a poodle of the West, not to being a collaborator with Netanyahu, which is the way Mahmoud Abbas has been, but instead to be sincerely committed to advancing the interests of the Palestinian people, but coming up with a solution, coming up with a final status for Jerusalem and a final status for the West Bank and a final status for the Golan and a final status for the Gaza that actually leads to the outcomes that they want to see. Everybody hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and of course, hit the join button. We'd love to have you here. What about the civilians that were headed south to leave? Wonder if they'll be allowed to leave Gaza. Oh, let me tell you something. You will never have a problem as a Palestinian leaving Gaza. As long as you're going out through the Rafah border, as long as you headed to Egypt, you good. They'll let you leave. The problem is they ain't letting you back. This is the problem. People keep saying, well, why aren't the Arab nations welcoming in the Palestinian people from Gaza? Why isn't Jordan accepting more people? Why isn't Egypt accepting more people? In addition to the economic conditions that have worsened in Egypt under Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and in addition to the fact that Jordan is 50% Palestinian already, I mean, Jesus, how many do you want them to take? There's also the question that the Arab nations don't want to be allies to a second Nakba. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, there are members of the Knesset, there are members of Netanyahu's cabinet, there are members of the private sphere, all of whom have said we support um, a second Nakba. We are going to have a second Nakba. We are going to destroy Gaza to the point of knocking them back 3 generations. We're going to reduce Gaza to tents. This is the language they're using. In 1948, I'll be real quick with this. And Heather, thank you for joining the team. We love you out there. In 1948, more than 700,000 Palestinians were evacuated from their land. They were expelled from what is now Israel. Some of them ended up in Gaza. A large number of them ended up in places like Khan Yunis, or the Jabalia refugee camp, and they ended up there because they weren't allowed to return to their homes. That's part of the Nakba. And then we saw laws like the 1954 Infiltrators Act and other things that made it illegal for Palestinians to return to their own homes. Palestinians have been refugees since 1948. They have been refugees since 1948. What we're seeing right now is a similar move in the minds of many Palestinians, where yes, it's wartime. We're being pushed out and we're being told, oh, you can get humanitarian aid. Oh, there's a humanitarian corridor in Rafah. You can leave and go to Egypt. They know that the Israeli government will not let them back, just like they weren't allowed to go back to their homes in Jerusalem, just like they weren't allowed to go back to their homes in Wadi al-Hawadith or in Nazareth or in Ramle or all these places. In the same way they weren't allowed to go back in 1948, they're not allowed to go back now. This is the reality, and they understand that. So they don't want any parts. They don't want any parts. Got some new comments coming in. Saudis made a deal with Kushner and oh, yeah, Saudi Arabia will be an interesting thing to watch. We can talk about Saudi Arabia another time, but it's an interesting thing to watch. Sage D says, um, if Israel breaks the agreement like it has historically always done, is there more of a chance that organizations, governments will step up and take action? I mean, so that's the interesting thing. There is a very good chance that Israel will break the ceasefire, or that Israel will use a very small action or an unavoidable action by Hamas or some other actor as the pretext for continuing to bomb Gaza. And yes, the international community will notice that. But the problem is, what do you do? Do you take them to the International Criminal Court? Well, guess what? Hamas is party to the International Criminal Court. They're party to the Rome Statute. Israel is not party to the International Criminal Court. They say we will not be held accountable by the International Criminal Court. They've already said that the UN, they don't respect the UN's decisions. They've already said that organizations like Amnesty International shouldn't be respected. And so in that context, what do you do? It's a tough question, right? At the end of the day, the only real pressure that can be applied to Israel, other than some wild military intervention, which would never happen, and I don't want to happen, shouldn't happen, is that the United States can finally exercise its power. The United States could actually say enough. Now, according to my sources, and they're good sources, Biden has been speaking to Netanyahu, and he's been saying and encouraging a ceasefire, encouraging the humanitarian pauses, encouraging all this stuff. But he does so privately. But at some point, at some point, at some point, they're going to have to make a public declaration. They're going to have to make a public declaration. Check them. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm just checking an update. Questions from y'all are important here, but I want to talk a little bit more about this ceasefire. And for those who came late, again, ceasefire has been announced. They call it a 4-day ceasefire. That is really just a pause. It's a temporary truce. It's a humanitarian pause at best. The deal, by the way, was mediated by Qatar very, very early in the morning. Remember, I'm in the East Coast, New York. It's 11 p.m. here. It's 7 hours later in Tel Aviv and in Khan Yunis and in Jerusalem. So, and so Qatar helped negotiate this deal, and it was a deal that was tough. Also, 3 Americans were released, 3 American, I think, state officials or whatever. And the idea here is that people will get some relief. But let's be clear about the numbers. 14,100 Palestinians have been killed. 14,100 Palestinians have been killed. 1.7 Palestinians, 1.7 million, Palestinians, 1.7 million Palestinians have been forced from their homes. I told you in 1948, 700,000 were evicted. 1.7 have been forced out now. 14,000 have been killed and counting. This deal has been in the works for days, but it's there. But at this point, we have to understand that we are not out of the woods. We are not in a space where we can say, okay, the violence is over. Again, you talk about Friday, family. Friday. Oh, I'm sorry, Sunday. Mohammed Khatib asked how many of the 14,000 children. The number that I've seen so far has been 5,000. The number could be higher. I looked at numbers just yesterday, and it's so disturbing. I looked at numbers just yesterday from Al Ahli Hospital, but also Shifa Hospital. And in a Shifa hospital just this past week, 8 babies suffocated. 8 babies suffocated. And when I say suffocated, they were premature and they were hooked to breathing machines. Anybody here who's ever had a premature child, I've had a premature child. Your baby was born premature and it's on a breathing machine. And the only thing you need, the most vital thing that you need, is for your baby to get oxygen. And the oxygen machine gives them the oxygen, and the electricity keeps the oxygen machine going. And they cut the electricity knowing that babies would die. And the argument is, well, Hamas is underneath the hospital, so they're allowed to bomb it. They're allowed to cut electricity. They're allowed to cut fuel. That's not true. That's a violation of international law. The Geneva Conventions are very clear about that. So we also have to have a national conversation, an international conversation about Israel's burden of proof. You have to prove not just that there's a tunnel underneath a hospital, and Israel built that tunnel in 1983, by the way. You can't just prove that there's a couple guns or some weapons down there. We don't know where those weapons came from. It hasn't been clear. Israel hasn't proven that either. The CGI graphics ain't cutting it, and the sprawl of weapons on the ground outside of the hospital don't do it. But they have to show that the hospital at that time that it was struck was an active site, that it was engaged in or leading hostilities. It's not enough to say, well, civilians are casualties and that's just what happens. Let me tell y'all something. This is a question that you ask. And this is always the tell. You say to people who are defending Israel's actions, if Hamas were hiding in the exact same way under a hospital in Tel Aviv, and it was Israeli children hooked to those incubators, and it was Israeli citizens who were getting dialysis, and it was Israeli citizens who were sheltering in place inside the hospital, would you still support blowing it up? That's the question you ask. See what they say. You're gonna get a very different answer, or you'll get some gobbledygook. What you're not going to get is, yeah, blow up our kids. Nobody wants to blow up their own children. Nobody wants to blow up other people's children. The problem comes when you live in a society that is Orientalist and racist and white supremacist and anti-Semitic and Islamophobic and patriarchal and homophobic, and all the isms that function in our world. We enter a space where we don't see all people as full human beings. And if you don't see people as full human beings, it's very, 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 very easy to no longer see their humanity and to no longer think that they shouldn't be vulnerable to premature death. So we have to always keep track of each other's humanity, because otherwise they just become numbers. They just become aggregates. They just become demographics, and they're easily disposable. And so when they start talking about searching out Hamas and blowing up the Gaza Strip, it's like they forget that Palestinian babies are there. But if you construct Palestinians and Arabs more broadly as violent and as evil and as barbaric, then it's very easy to not see their humanity and to believe that they're not worthy of the same protections as Israeli children or American children or French children or German children. And that becomes part of the problem. True Red Crime, I want to thank you for showing up and showing out with that donation, yo. We love you. We appreciate you. Overkill Gaming, same thing, yo. And I know you got a comment there. I'm finna read it right now. Thank you so much for being a part of what we're doing. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all, man. Overkill Gaming said, as someone who was raised Muslim and has a deep respect for Judaism, the people in charge of Israel seem extremely foreign to me. I don't see Judaism in them at all. The Israeli state project is not a religious project. It's a Jewish state, but understand they're not framing that as a religious process. Israel is a secular democracy. It's not a religious democracy. It's not a theocracy. It's an ethno state. And when you talk about early Zionism and the Zionist movement, the early Zionist movement, particularly the first couple of waves, it wasn't about, and thank you, Figueroa Bonchi, the Zionist movement was led by secular people. Some of the people were even atheists. They didn't come to Israel to fulfill their religious beliefs or their religious prospects. It wasn't a theological imagination that drove them to historic Palestine, to Ottoman Palestine, and the British Mandate of Palestine. They came there to create a settler colony. They came there absolutely to a place that they have deep roots. They came there because there's a long-standing Jewish connection to Palestine. They came there because of the vicious anti-Semitism that was happening in Europe. No doubt about that. But they didn't come there for religious purposes. That's not to say that there's not a religious dimension to this. That's not to say that they weren't saying next year in Jerusalem during Passover. It's not to say that in their religious rites they don't see a return to Zion as critical. I'm not saying any of that. What I am saying is the Zionist movement was a political movement, not a religious one. And so when you get to the stage now where you look at Netanyahu, or you look at Itamar Ben-Gvir, and you say, wait a minute, these cats don't seem very religious to me. They're not. They're not more religious than they are political. I'm not speaking about their individual faith. I'm talking about how they operate as agents of the state. That's something else. That's something else altogether. I like how you thinking, yo. They said we had 200 likes. Let's see if we can get it to 300. That's right. Hit the like button, y'all. It don't cost you nothing. Logan Faraday, how long will it take for the one-state solution to be accepted by Israelis? They've been educated to hate Palestinians since forever. Won't be easy at all. I agree. For most Zionists, actually for all Zionists, I'm going to say the one-state solution is a non-starter. Because a one-state solution means that you would no longer be a Jewish state if everybody gets a vote. They'd say we'd be outnumbered. If someone in Ramallah gets a vote and someone in Khalil gets a vote, Kamal, thank you so much for the love. Appreciate you, family. If these people all get votes, the people in East Jerusalem get a vote, just like the people in West Jerusalem do, then suddenly you have majority Palestinians. See, a Jewish state only works if there's a majority of Jewish people. And a majority of Jewish people can only happen in Palestine if a whole bunch of Palestinians don't get the right to vote. They don't get citizenship. This is just the demographic reality. And so, Wallo Blanco, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And Israelis will tell you this. This isn't my philosophy. This is their philosophy. They'll say to you, we can't have a one-state solution because it would mean the demographic destruction of the Jewish state. And so they're going to say that can't happen. So we're going to have to imagine citizenship and belonging differently. We're going to have to convince people that it's okay to not be a Jewish state as long as we continue to protect and honor the rights of Jewish people, and we create pockets of safety, spaces of safety. No Jewish person should feel unsafe. No one should be expelled. No one should be harmed. No one should be killed. But shared land without the desire to rule is the constant challenge of the colonial imagination. Let's see here. What do you think of Hussam Zomlet becoming the new PLO president? Woo! Y'all getting spicy. Hussam Zomlet's a friend of mine. I spoke to him last week. Hussam's a smart guy, and he understands. I spoke to him last week, and he talked about the need for a singular Palestinian voice right now. He seems to beginning to be sort of speaking to Gaza and the West Bank in the kind of pre-1993 mode of we are one people. I think the Palestinian people will enjoy that not enjoy that. They appreciate that kind of vision, especially in a moment of crisis and war right now. Hussam Zomlet could be a powerful PLO leader. I think the question is, at a moment where the Palestinian Authority is being seen as corrupt by the majority of Palestinian people in the West Bank, at a moment where where confidence in the PLO and in the PA and in Fatah is low, maybe the question should not be, should Hussam Zomlet lead the PLO? The question is, should the PLO be leading the Palestinian people? That's not my question. It's not for me to say. I'm saying that's a question that some Palestinians are raising. I'm curious to know where the Palestinian people will end up on that issue. It's up for them to decide. I'm an outsider. It's not my business. I stand in solidarity. At the same time, this is probably not the moment to have that conversation. Internal Palestinian politics and internal Palestinian division uh, is probably not um, the biggest priority right now when you have an Israeli state that is systematically attempting to commit genocide in Gaza, that is prosecuting apartheid in the West Bank and inside of the state of Israel, that is leading an ethnic cleansing in the southern part of the Gaza Strip as we speak. In the midst of all of that, the internal divisions might not be the move. Um, that's just how I'm seeing it, how I see people seeing it. Um, Doctor, Professor, so and so. I don't think I'm not. I feel like Azam Tabal. I think you're responding to somebody. I'm not sure how. Oh, I see. That's no excuse, Mark. We're in South Africa. Yeah, I agree. Uh, Um, to be clear, and then I'm going to get to Arena's point. Doctor, Professor, so and so. I'm not saying that that's an excuse. I'm saying that is the Israeli excuse. I'm saying that they will not accept a one-state solution because they know that it will be the end of their demographic ethno state, of their ethno national apartheid state. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying that's a good move. I'm just saying they're going to begin from a place of saying, no, we don't want that. So any kind of negotiation has to begin from a place of saying that's a non-starter for them. And so they're going to have to be persuaded or convinced. There's going to be a demand made because it's not going to come voluntarily. That's all I'm saying. Rina Sehon says, since Rashid Khalidi was removed during negotiations and replaced by incompetent leaders who didn't know how to negotiate, who are the best people to advocate strongly for the Palestinian people? I don't know. I think there's a wide variety of brilliant, courageous, visionary Palestinian leaders, and it's up to the Palestinian people to make that determination. I'm not Palestinian, and I have no say in their internal matters of negotiation or leadership. So, what I will say is I have confidence that the Palestinian people have the capacity to do it. But it's up to them to decide who, where, how, etc. Let's see here. Two-state solution, yeah, ain't gonna happen, Shamima. I saw somebody, I think Mark wrote something that I wanted to respond to. Um, and again, I appreciate y'all for hanging out with me as we talk about this so-called ceasefire. Abdullah Barghouti can be our Mandela. You know, that's what 47 refugees said. Again, I'll leave that up to you all. Um, I have no say. I have no investment in who or what the outcome is. I'm sorry, I have no, as long as the final status is justice. Um, Mark W says, why won't Israel accept its colonization? I'm curious. I'm not sure I understand what Mark W means by that. So if you want to say more about that, I got you. Um, that's right. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll pack it up. But I appreciate y'all, man. Priscilla P, thank you so much. Thank you for the donation. Thank you for the kind words. Lada Stapleton, thank you so much for the love. I'm honored to be part of the community, part of the family at CUNY. Naraman the Khatib said, do you think yesterday's BRICS meeting and the applications from the Global South played a factor with the U.S. seemingly losing power globally? Yesterday's BRICS meeting certainly did not help the case of Israel. Um, and by the way, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's a commitment to challenging the West and traditional Western power blocks on issues of economy, on issues of trade in particular. And so, if you got Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa together, and they're making a resolution and they're making a commitment to pushing back on Western domination, and particularly the Western collaboration with Israel in this moment, yeah, it didn't help. But honestly, even before the BRICS meeting yesterday, I feel like this deal was done. Long before there was a conversation among those nations, there was a behind-the-scenes conversation with the United States, according to my sources, and Israel, There were other conversations. I think Israel understood that it was losing global support. It was losing the public sentiment. Um, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to imagine an outcome other than this. Um, yeah. Do you see Israel making a move on the Temple Mount? I can see it. That's a perpetual question. That's a perpetual question. For those that don't know, we're talking about in the old city of East Jerusalem, in the old city. You of course have Haram al-Sharif there. You have the Aqsa compound. You have Aqsa Mosque. You have the Dome of the Rock. Um, uh, and there's a perpetual struggle over that land. It's the site of the Second Temple being destroyed in 70 CE. There are many debates about who has a right to that holy land, who has a right to resurrect a temple, who has a right to hold on to the current Aqsa compound as it's constructed. These are fights and debates that go on. And as of now, what we call the status quo in East Jerusalem is one where Jordan controls the religious sites, Aqsa, Wailing Wall, Knesset al-Qiyamah, was it, um, Knesset al-Qiyamah, Church of the Sepulchre. All of it is controlled by Jordan. But ultimately, it's going to probably come down to, these are all final status questions. The status of Jerusalem is going to be a fascinating one, and that's important too. When Israelis or pro-Israeli voices say, "Oh well, um, we even gave the Palestinians Jerusalem." No, y'all didn't. What you gave them was little pockets of the Jerusalem governorate, the Muhafazah, right? Like it wasn't like you were giving them the old city. It wasn't like you were giving them, uh, you know all of the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, and Church of Sepulchre, and Aqsa Mosque, and I'm not saying you necessarily should. I actually like the idea of a status quo run by an international body, but the point here is that it's never exactly what people say it is. And again, and Kira Clark just said it perfectly. It's not, as I've been saying all night, it's not a ceasefire. It's a pause fire. It's a pause. That's it. Mehdi Mohammed Zaaf, thank you so much for the donation. Thank you so much for the love. The super chat, Jackie Irvin, I appreciate you so much for your donation and your love as well. Mehdi Mohammed Zaaf said they wouldn't make a move on the Al Aqsa Mosque and seize it, since it would inflame a total war, not just from the Arab countries, but everywhere. This, again, you raise an important point. We've seen Aqsa Mosque raids before, though. We've seen attacks on Aqsa before. But yes, if Aqsa were completely overtaken, and for those that don't know, Aqsa is the third holiest masjid, the third holiest mosque in Islam. It's hard to imagine that Muslims around the world wouldn't react, that Arab countries around the area, the region, wouldn't react in extraordinarily irate fashion if Haram al-Sharif were somehow were somehow overtaken. So I agree. I'm not worried about I'm not worried. I'm not worried about that in the short term. I think all bets are off for lots of things, though, and so I wouldn't presume that it could never happen. That Haram al-Sharif is not as safe as you all may think it is. Um, let's see here. I think we're about done, family, but I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your questions. If there's another question that's coming in, I'll take it. Everybody, we're building, as you know. Oh, I'm sorry. Constanza Eliana said, I'm late, so you might have answered this already, but this doesn't feel like a helpful pause if there's no water, electricity being restored. There will be some water. Electricity is not being permanently restored. I'm not even sure if it's temporarily restored. We were told fuel, humanitarian aid, fuel, and I think temporary electricity, maybe. That's what I was told. So we'll find out. We'll find out what that means. But your point is well taken. Regardless, it's very temporary and it's not going to solve the actual problem. Beyond Images, thank you so much for the love. Khadija, thank you so much. We love you. it's it's a tough spot to be in. It's a tough spot to be in. I don't see this as um, anything more than a stopgap. But I also understand that if you're in the Gaza Strip right now and you've been shot or shot at, you've been bombed, you've lost family, you've lost friends. I mean, a 4-day pause may feel like nothing to us sitting here in our comfortable homes, but if you're there, it does matter. Where do you think the tunnels are? I have no idea. But I think one thing that's important to remember is that the tunnels that Israel magically found under the Al Shifa hospital were built by, drumroll, Israel. In 1983, Israel built those tunnels. Remember, Gaza Strip was under control from 1967 until 2006 by the Israeli government. They built underground tunnels for security. They built a secret operating room for security and for emergency purposes. So that's why they're like, we're sure there's tunnels under the hospital. Of course you are. You made them. But they're trying to make that seem that as if that's proof that Hamas was under there operating an elaborate terrorist command center. And again, there's just no evidence of that. I can't say it didn't happen, but I can tell you for sure they haven't proven that it happened. And that's something that matters. And yes, 1983, Israel built that. That's not my conjecture. Israel has admitted it as much. There's a piece in Tablet magazine, which is a far right Zionist magazine that also acknowledges it. So that's actually very, 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 very true. Yes, Ehud Barak also said it on CNN. You have to forgive me. I don't watch too much CNN these days. I'm sure you can imagine why. Um, let's see. All right, family. Look, I guess we're gonna call it a night. I appreciate y'all. Um, I really do. Everybody, we're building something here. We've been today, as of today, in fact, this channel is a month old. And over the course of this month, we have built a wonderful community. We're already up to 27,000 subscribers. You know, it takes some people, a lot of people say it takes a year to get 3 or 4,000. We got 27,000 in a month. Uh, you know, people say it takes, you know, years to get, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of views. We got almost 1 million views. We'll have 1 million views in the next couple of days. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that this is a testament to the fact that this channel is needed. I continue to be on national news. I continue to host Al Jazeera. I continue to host the Griot. I'm not going to stop either of those things. I love them. They're both necessary. There's also a space that's necessary for education, for community conversation, for radical left analysis, for global politics. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm doing right now. That's why I come on here every day and give you this content. And the response has been amazing, and I'm so grateful for y'all for it. So thank you to everybody who's made that happen. My only request is that you subscribe, that you share the videos, that you spread the word, and if you can, join MLH official, join Marc Lamont Hill official, get that membership, get a bronze membership. That's all I ask. Get a silver, a gold, a platinum, whatever you want, but just get that bronze membership as a base level, because it allows us to build. It allows us to bring other voices on. We're launching some interesting stuff. We're going to do a nightly or almost nightly lecture called Night School, where we talk and we build on ideas. Not a TV show, not a program, but Night School, where we build, where I can break down ideas. I can go into history. I can do these things, and it won't just be me. It'll be the smartest minds in the country, smartest minds around the world, who will help us break down ideas. We're going to make original videos. We're going to make explainers so that you understand these issues. You should be able to. Today, for example, we talked about what was happening in Congo. And we had one of the leading experts on Congo come in, and he talked for an hour and 20 minutes, and he broke it all down for us. Make sure you check that video out about what's really going on in the Congo. That type of work happens because we have capacity, and we have capacity because of your memberships. So please hit the subscribe button. That helps. It lets YouTube know that videos matter. Hit the like button right now. Don't cost you a penny to hit the like button. Hit that like button right now. Knowing that our videos are liked, knowing that our videos are supported. There we go. Michelle in Wash, thank you so much for becoming a new member. We really appreciate you. As you know, by you joining, first of all, by you just liking it and subscribing, it shows YouTube that our content matters and it gets it out to a wider range, which allows us to sustain the channel. But also, at the same time, when you join, it keeps a stability for us. It allows us to hire folk. It allows us to have staff. It allows us to have editors, video editors. It allows us to make a wider range of content, and it allows me to create a platform space, not just for myself, because I have TV, I have other platforms, but to create a platform for other radical voices who maybe can't get a platform on TV, who can't get the fancy podcast deals, but instead can just be part of our community and be a part of our conversation. That's what I want to see. Romario Vlogs, thank you so much. Another person just joined the MLH official channel. Yo, that's so dope. You know, and a lot of times people ask me, and particularly people internationally, people on the continent of Africa, people in Palestine, people in Jordan, people throughout the diaspora say, yo, how can we support the work you're doing? That's the answer. And Heather, thank you so much for joining us. That's the answer. It's subscribe. In Mark's night school, I'm gonna learn Arabic. Yo, we might do Arabic class. I don't know if I need to be the one to teach it, but I'll certainly be part of the conversation. Man, I can certainly share some tips. We got Alat Karmi. Thank you so much for the donation. Appreciate you, family. Shout out to Alat. Shukran katir, habibi. Mark, I feel people on Patreon, but right now I got the memberships right here on YouTube, so I'm just rocking with that. I appreciate you, Momo. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for joining. Yo, that's what it's about. These subscriptions matter. These memberships matter. All of it helps create an environment. It helps create a context. It creates a community where we can do amazing stuff. Ahmed Yusri, thank you so much for joining. Yo, I am grateful. I'm seeing a lot of people. I'm seeing a lot of people say they want to do Arabic class. Mizan says, yeah, Arabic. Priscilla P, yes, Arabic. Emerald said, give heads up. How many of y'all, if you want Arabic class, hit the like button. Laura Ostrov, thanks so much for that donation. I appreciate you. Love you. How many of y'all, Shay Pringle, thank you, yo. I'm so grateful, yo. Y'all overwhelm me with your generosity. Y'all want Arabic class? Y'all want to do Arabic up in this joint? Y'all get what y'all want. We're a community, right? It's not just what I want to talk about, it's what y'all want to talk about. All right, y'all. Well, again, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the join button. I love y'all. See y'all later, and I'll keep you up to date on what's going on with Israel, what's going on in Palestine, what's going on specifically in Gaza, and we're going to pray for peace. But we know that prayer ain't enough. We got to do the work of justice. We who believe in freedom shall not rest.